The signal came through at 0300 hours, broken and weak. Hana sat up straight in her chair at the communications station, her tired eyes suddenly alert. She had been monitoring deep space frequencies for 6 hours, expecting nothing but the usual cosmic noise. This was different. This is Helios Colony. Under attack. The creche. Please. Anyone. The voice broke apart into static, then came back. 50,000 civilians. Shields failing. Children here. Please help. Then silence. Hana's hands moved quickly across her controls, trying to pull the signal back. But it was gone. She recorded everything and sent it up the chain of command immediately. Within an hour, the message reached Earth's United Defense Command. Within 2 hours, it was played in the Galactic Council chambers. Ambassador Ki-wan stood before the council, a room filled with representatives from 40 different alien species. The chamber was massive, with seats rising in circular tiers around a central platform. Holographic displays showed the location of Helios Colony, far out in the Outer Rim territories. The distress call is clear, Ki-wan said, his voice steady. 50,000 civilians are dying. We must respond. High Counselor Trelvon, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, shook his head slowly. Ambassador, we understand your concern. However, Helios Colony is outside our immediate jurisdiction. The proper protocols require— How long will those protocols take? Ki-wan interrupted, something he rarely did. Trelvon paused. 6 weeks for a full council vote. Then we must assemble a response force, which could take another month. They'll be dead in days, Ki-wan said flatly. Another council member, a floating creature with translucent skin, spoke up. Ambassador, please understand. The Creche Dominion has never been defeated. They have superior numbers. Even if we could respond quickly, sending ships would be unwise. It would be throwing away resources for a colony that is already lost. Ki-wan looked around the chamber. He saw fear in many eyes. The Creche had a reputation. They had conquered 47 systems in the last decade. No one wanted to challenge them. So you will do nothing? Ki-wan asked. We will follow proper procedures, Trelvon said. That is how civilization works, Ambassador. Ki-wan collected his data tablet and walked out of the chamber. Behind him, he heard whispers. Some council members seemed relieved. Others looked uncomfortable. None of them looked willing to act. On Earth, the situation was different. Ki-wan's report reached the Defense Command within minutes through quantum communications. Admiral Min Seo read it once, then called an emergency meeting of Earth's military leadership. The meeting lasted 30 minutes. The vote was unanimous. Captain Dae-hyun received his orders at 1400 hours. He was in the training facility, running combat drills with his crew, when his communicator buzzed. He read the message twice to make sure he understood correctly. All personnel to the Indomitable immediately, he announced over the facility's speakers. We launch in 6 hours. His crew didn't question it. They had trained for rapid deployment. Within 2 hours, the ship was being prepped. Within 4 hours, supplies and weapons were loaded. Within 6 hours, 3 massive battle carriers sat in Earth's orbit, ready to depart. The Indomitable was the largest, a ship designed for both space combat and rapid troop deployment. Next to it floated the Relentless and the Vanguard. Together, they carried 5,000 military personnel and enough firepower to level a small moon. In the command center of the Indomitable, Dae-hyun stood looking at a star map. The journey would take 4 days at maximum FTL speed. He studied the intelligence reports on the Creche. 15 warships surrounded Helios Colony. Each ship was larger than a human carrier. The Creche had numbers and size on their side. Dr. Yuna entered the command center, carrying a data pad. She was one of Earth's leading experts on alien biology, and she had been assigned to the mission as an advisor. Captain, she said, I've been reviewing the Creche physiology. They evolved on a low-gravity world, about 40% of Earth's gravity. Dae-hyun turned to her. What does that mean for us? It means they're physically weaker than humans, much weaker. But they compensate with numbers and aggressive tactics. They also have excellent shields and weapons technology. So we can't match them in firepower, Daehyun said. No, Yuna admitted. But we can match them in other ways. Before Daehyun could respond, his communications officer announced that they had visitors. 3 Galactic Council observers were requesting permission to board. It was standard procedure for human military operations. The Council didn't trust Earth's Deathworlders to operate without supervision. Daehyun granted permission. The 3 observers came aboard, and he could see the nervousness in their movements. One of them, a Valerian named Rilthar, approached him. "Captain, I must express the Council's concerns," Rilthar said in accented English. "The Kresh have never been defeated. Your 3 ships cannot possibly—" "We're not here to defeat them," Daehyun interrupted. "We're here to save those civilians." "But the odds—" "Noted," Daehyun said simply. The fleet launched at exactly 2,000 hours. As the 3 massive ships moved away from Earth, pulling away from the blue planet that humans called home, messages came in from the Galactic Council. Most were warnings, some were predictions of failure. A few expressed quiet hope. One message came from a council member who remained anonymous. It was short. "Thank you for trying. No one else would." As the fleet jumped into FTL, streaking across space faster than light, Trelvon sent one final message to Daehyun. The High Counselor's voice was heavy with resignation. "Captain, you are throwing away 3 ships and 5,000 warriors for nothing. The Kresh will destroy you, and Earth will lose valuable military assets. This is foolish." Daehyun stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, watching stars blur past as they traveled through FTL. His crew worked around him, checking systems, running diagnostics, preparing for the battle ahead. These men and women had volunteered for this mission. Every single one of them knew the odds. None of them had hesitated. He opened a channel back to Trelvon. "High Counselor, you say the Kresh have never been defeated," Daehyun said calmly. "That's because they've never fought someone from a death world. We're not throwing away warriors. We're sending exactly what those civilians asked for. Someone with the strength to help them. Someone with the courage to face impossible odds." He closed the channel and turned to his crew. 4 days to Helios Colony," he announced. "Get some rest. When we arrive, I want everyone sharp." As his crew moved to follow his orders, Daehyun looked at the star map one more time. Somewhere out there, 50,000 people were waiting to die. They had asked for help, and no one in the galaxy had answered. Except Earth. The Indomitable pushed through space, carrying humanity's answer to that desperate plea. They were coming. And the Kresh Dominion was about to learn what it meant to threaten someone under Earth's protection. The 3 ships moved through space like arrows cutting through water. Inside the Indomitable, life had settled into a rhythm. 4 days was not much time to prepare for a battle that might decide the fate of 50,000 lives. Lieutenant Taemin stood in the tactical room, studying holographic displays of the Helios system. He was young, only 26, but he had a sharp mind for strategy. Captain Daehyun had personally requested him for this mission. "They'll expect us to engage from a distance," Taemin said to the other tactical officers. "Standard doctrine would be to use our missiles and maintain a safe range." "And that's not what we're going to do?" asked one of the officers. Taemin shook his head. "The Kresh have superior shields. At long range, we'll just waste ammunition. We need to get close, very close." The other officers looked uncomfortable. Close-range space combat was dangerous. If ships got too near each other, any explosion could destroy multiple vessels. "That's insane," one of them muttered. "Maybe," Taemin agreed. "But our ships are more maneuverable than theirs, and our crews can handle higher G-forces during combat turns." On the training deck, Sergeant Jiwoo was putting her Marines through their exercises. 2,000 combat troops filled the massive bay, running through zero-gravity combat drills. Jiwoo watched them with a critical eye. "Again!" she shouted as one squad fumbled a boarding maneuver. In real combat, that mistake gets everyone killed. Reset and do it right. The Galactic Council observers watched from a safe distance. Rilthar looked disturbed by what he saw. The humans were practicing hand-to-hand combat in zero gravity, something considered primitive by most advanced species. Modern warfare was supposed to be clean, conducted with weapons from safe distances. But these humans trained like they expected to grab their enemies with their own hands. Is this really necessary? Rilthar asked Jiwoo during a break. Jiwoo looked at him. She was not a tall woman, but she carried herself with absolute confidence. You know what the difference is between us and the Kresh? They think their technology makes them warriors. We know that warriors use technology, but at the end of the day, combat is personal. But surely in space, you won't need to. We're going to board their ships, Jiwoo said flatly. We're going to go inside their vessels and take them from the inside. Because that's what you do when you're outnumbered and outgunned. You get creative. In the medical bay, Dr. Yuna was giving briefings to the medical staff. She had spent the past 2 days analyzing every piece of data on Kresh biology that Earth possessed. Their respiratory system is sensitive to changes in air pressure, she explained. Their skin is tough, but their joints are weak points. If any of you end up treating Kresh prisoners, remember they need lower oxygen levels than humans. One of the medics raised a hand. Doctor, should we be preparing to treat enemy wounded? We prepare to treat anyone who's wounded, Yuna said firmly. That's what separates us from them. In the engineering section, Chief Engineer Hyun was solving a different kind of problem. He had been asked to increase the ship's speed by 15%. It should have been impossible, but he had found a way by rerouting power from non-essential systems. It'll work, he told Captain Dae-hyun over the communicator, but it means we'll be running hot, very hot. If we maintain this speed for more than 6 hours, we risk damaging the engines. How long until we reach Helios at normal speed? Dae-hyun asked. 4 days. And at increased speed? 3 days, 8 hours. Do it, Dae-hyun ordered. Those civilians don't have 4 days. Hyun grinned. Understood, Captain. We'll get you there fast. Pilot Sung-ho sat in the fighter bay, running pre-flight checks on his small combat craft. Around him, 50 other pilots did the same. These fighters were designed for space combat, fast and deadly. Sung-ho had painted a small Earth flag on his cockpit, along with tally marks for his previous missions. Another pilot, a rookie named Bora, approached him nervously. Sung-ho, can I ask you something? Sure. The Kresh have over 200 fighters according to intelligence. We have 50. How are we supposed to survive this? Sung-ho looked up at her and smiled. You're thinking about it wrong. It's not about surviving. It's about making sure those civilians survive. Our job is to keep the Kresh busy while the Marines do their work. We draw fire. We create chaos. We make them focus on us instead of the colony. So we're bait? We're shepherds, Sung-ho corrected. The Kresh are wolves. And those colonists are the flock. Shepherds don't run from wolves. They face them down. On the second day of the journey, Captain Dae-hyun called a meeting of all senior officers. The council observers were also present. He laid out the battle plan. We'll exit FTL at the edge of the system, he began. According to our latest intelligence, the Kresh have 15 warships in orbit around the colony. The colony's shields are failing. They have maybe 6 hours of protection left. He brought up a holographic display showing the Helios system. The Kresh will expect us to negotiate or retreat when they see our numbers. Instead, we're going to charge directly into their formation. We'll split into 3 groups. Indomitable will take the center. Relentless and Vanguard will come in from the flanks. That's suicide, one of the council observers said. No, Taemin spoke up. That's overwhelming force applied at close range. The Kresh use defensive formations. They're good at repelling attacks from a distance, but if we get inside their formation, they'll have to worry about hitting each other with their own weapons. Dae-hyun nodded. Once we're engaged, our fighters will launch and keep their fighters busy. Meanwhile, Marine teams will board any Kresh ships we disable. We take their ships, we capture their crews, and we use their own vessels against them if necessary. This plan requires perfect timing, another officer noted. Then we'll execute it perfectly, Dae-hyun said simply. That night, many of the crew had trouble sleeping. They knew what was coming. In the mess halls, soldiers talked quietly about home, about Earth, about why they had volunteered for this mission. Private Woo Jin, a sniper, sat cleaning his rifle for the 3rd time that day. Another Marine asked him why he was going on this mission. My sister lives on a colony world, Woo Jin said quietly. Not Helios, a different one. But someday, her colony might need help. I'm here so that when that day comes, someone will come for her too. On the third day, they received an update from Earth. The Galactic Council had officially condemned the human fleet's mission. They called it reckless and dangerous. Several council members had suggested sanctions against Earth if the mission failed. Ki-Wan sent a personal message to Dae-hyun. They're afraid of you, not because of what you might do to the creche. They're afraid because you're showing them what they should have been all along, brave enough to help. Don't let their fear stop you. On the morning of the fourth day, the fleet dropped out of FTL at the edge of the Helios system. Immediately, sensors lit up with contacts. 15 creche warships, just as intelligence had predicted. The colony's shields were flickering, failing. Dae-hyun stood on the bridge, watching the tactical displays. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. There was no panic, no fear. Just determination. Communications. Open a channel to the creche flagship, Dae-hyun ordered. Channel open, sir. A face appeared on the main screen. It was Creche Commander Vectal, a being with dark scales and cold eyes. He looked at the human ships and laughed. 3 little ships? Vectal said in galactic common language. The mighty Deathworlders send only 3 ships? This is insulting. Dae-hyun stood calmly. Commander Vectal, you are in violation of galactic law. You are attacking civilians. You have 10 minutes to power down your weapons and surrender your ships. Vectal laughed harder. Surrender? To you? Human, I have conquered 47 systems. I have never been defeated. You have 3 ships. I have 15. Your shields are weaker. Your weapons are fewer. What makes you think you can threaten me? Dae-hyun's expression didn't change. Because we're from Earth, and you're about to learn why that matters. He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. All ships, battle stations. Launch all fighters, Marines. Prepare for boarding actions. He paused, looking at each of his officers. Show them what humans can do. The Indomitable's engines flared bright as the ship accelerated forward. Behind it, the Relentless and Vanguard did the same. 3 human ships against 15 creche warships. The battle for Helios Colony was about to begin. The creche ships opened fire first. Bright beams of energy cut through space, aimed at the 3 approaching human vessels. The Indomitable's shields flared as the first shots hit, glowing blue against the darkness of space. Shields holding at 80%, reported the tactical officer. Multiple hits, minimal damage. Continue forward, Dae-hyun ordered. Don't slow down. On the creche flagship, Vectal watched with growing confusion. The human ships weren't dodging. They weren't returning fire. They were just charging straight ahead, accelerating even as his weapons hit them. What are they doing? One of his officers asked. Being stupid, Vectal said. Focus all fire on the lead ship. Break it apart. The creche fleet concentrated their weapons on the Indomitable. The human ship shuddered under the assault, its shields glowing brighter and brighter. Warning alarms sounded throughout the ship. Shields at 40%, the tactical officer called out. Hull temperature rising. We're taking damage to sections 7 through 12. Hold course, Dae-hyun said calmly. Hyun, I need more speed. In engineering, Hyun was already pushing the engines beyond their normal limits. Captain, if I give you more speed, the engines will overheat in 30 minutes. I only need 20 minutes, Dae-hyun replied. Do it. The Indomitable surged forward even faster. Behind it, the Relentless and Vanguard split off, moving to flank the creche formation. The enemy ships tried to adjust, but the human vessels were moving too fast, changing direction too quickly. They can't maneuver like that, a creche officer said, staring at his screens. Their crew should be unconscious from the G-forces. But the humans weren't unconscious. In the Indomitable's corridors, crew members worked while experiencing forces that would have killed most aliens. Earth's heavy gravity had prepared them for this. What felt brutal to other species was merely uncomfortable to humans. Timon watched his tactical display, counting seconds. 3, 2, 1. Now, Captain. All ships, open fire, Dae-hyun commanded. The Indomitable had closed to less than 2 kilometers from the nearest Kresh ship. At this range, shields meant little. The human ship unleashed everything it had. Missiles, railgun rounds, energy weapons, all firing at once. The Kresh ship's shields collapsed instantly. Hull plating shattered. Explosions rippled across its surface. Within seconds, the ship was dead in space, leaking atmosphere and spinning slowly. Vektal stared in shock. That's impossible. They got through our shields. Commander, the other 2 human ships are engaging from the flanks, his tactical officer shouted. They're using the same tactic. The Relentless and Vanguard had also closed to point-blank range. More Kresh ships shuddered under the assault. The carefully organized defensive formation that Vektal had maintained was suddenly in chaos. All ships, target the human vessels. Surround them, Vektal ordered. But surrounding the human ships meant the Kresh vessels were now too close to each other. When they fired, they had to be careful not to hit their own ships. The humans had no such problem. They moved between Kresh vessels like sharks in a feeding frenzy, firing at anything in range. Sung Ho led his fighter squadron through the chaos. 50 small human fighters had launched from the carriers, and they darted between the massive capital ships like insects. "Red Squadron with me," Sung Ho called over the radio. "Target their fighter bays. Don't let them launch." Kresh fighters were starting to emerge from their hangars. Sung Ho dove toward the nearest carrier, weapons blazing. His missiles struck the hangar door just as a Kresh fighter was emerging. The explosion destroyed the enemy fighter and damaged the hangar, blocking the exit. "Good hit, lead," called Bo-Ra, following his example. "Engaging Hangar 2. The Kresh fighters that did manage to launch found themselves fighting an enemy that flew like no one they had ever faced. Human pilots made turns that should have knocked them unconscious. They executed maneuvers that defied standard tactics. A Kresh pilot got a lock on Sung Ho's fighter. He fired, but Sung Ho suddenly flipped his craft completely upside down and dove straight down relative to his previous position. The Kresh pilot tried to follow, but the G-forces were too much. He blacked out for just a moment, but that moment was enough. Sung Ho came around behind him and fired. Back on the Indomitable, Sergeant Ji-Woo was preparing her Marines for boarding actions. The ship had crippled 2 Kresh vessels, and now it was time to take them. "Listen up," she shouted over the troop bay's speakers. "We're going to board through their damaged sections. No gravity inside, so stay sharp. Kresh are bigger than us, but they're weaker. Use that. Stick to your teams, watch your corners, and remember, we need some of them alive for questioning." The Marines loaded into boarding pods. These were small, armored cylinders designed to carry 6 soldiers each. They would be fired at the enemy ships like missiles, puncture the hull, and deliver the troops inside. "Launch boarding teams," Daehyun ordered. 30 boarding pods shot out from the Indomitable. They crossed the space between ships in seconds, slamming into the damaged Kresh vessels. Cutting tools activated automatically, burning through the remaining hull plating. Ji-Woo was in the first pod. When the doors opened, she pushed herself into the Kresh ship in zero gravity. The corridor was dark, lit only by emergency lights. Smoke drifted in the air. She could hear Kresh voices shouting in the distance. "Move forward. Clear each room," she commanded. Her team pushed through the ship. The first Kresh soldiers they encountered were panicking, trying to seal bulkheads. When they saw the humans, they raised their weapons. The firefight was brief. In the confined corridors, the Kresh had nowhere to maneuver. The humans moved with precision, covering each other, advancing steadily. The Kresh soldiers fired wildly, unused to zero-gravity combat. One Kresh warrior launched himself at Ji-Woo, trying to use his larger size to overwhelm her. It was a mistake. Ji-Woo had trained in zero-G combat for years. She caught his arm, used his own momentum against him, and slammed him into the wall hard enough to knock him unconscious. "Room secured," she reported, moving to the bridge. Similar scenes played out across the 2 captured ships. The Kresh had never faced boarding actions before. Modern warfare didn't include such primitive tactics. But the humans made it work, clearing ship after ship. On the Kresh flagship, Vektal watched his fleet fall apart. He had started with 15 ships. Now 3 were captured, 4 were destroyed, and the rest were scattered, trying to reorganize. How are they doing this? He demanded. They only have 3 ships. His tactical officer looked terrified. Commander, their crews can survive G-forces that would kill our pilots. Their boarding teams are fighting inside our ships, and they're fighters. They fly like they're insane. Recall all ships to defensive formation, Vektal ordered. We regroup and overwhelm them with numbers. But regrouping was easier ordered than done. The human ships moved too fast, striking before the Kresh could organize. Every time Vektal gave an order, the situation had already changed. On the colony below, the civilians watched the battle through their failing shields. They had expected to die today. Instead, they were watching 3 human ships tear through a Kresh fleet. Observer Rilthar stood on the Indomitable's bridge, watching everything with wide eyes. He was recording it all, his mind trying to process what he was seeing. These humans fought with a ferocity and skill that defied everything he understood about warfare. This is impossible, he whispered to himself. They should be dead. All of them should be dead. But they weren't dead. They were winning. Daehyun studied the tactical display. Half the Kresh fleet was gone. The rest were retreating, trying to regroup. But he could see a problem. The colony's shields were about to fail, and Vektal's flagship was positioning itself for orbital bombardment. Captain, we're receiving a transmission from the colony, the communications officer reported. The shields are going to collapse in 30 minutes. Daehyun made a decision. Relentless and Vanguard continue engaging the Kresh fleet. Indomitable will protect the colony. Launch all remaining marine teams. We're going down. Taemin looked at him. Sir, if we enter atmosphere, we'll be vulnerable to ground-based fire. Then we'll have to be fast, Daehyun said. Because those civilians don't have time for us to be careful. The Indomitable turned toward the planet. Below, on the colony's surface, Kresh ground forces were preparing to execute the colonists. Vektal had given the order. If he couldn't win in space, he would at least have his revenge on the people who had called for help. What he didn't know was that the humans were coming, and they were bringing their full fury with them. Jiwoo strapped herself into a drop pod, along with 2,000 other Marines. They were about to do something that most species considered suicidal. They were going to drop from orbit directly into a combat zone. All Marines, this is Captain Daehyun, came the announcement. Those colonists have been waiting to die for days. We're going to show them that help has arrived. Hit the ground running and don't stop until every civilian is safe. Jiwoo checked her weapon one more time. Around her, other Marines did the same. They had trained for this. They were ready. Drop pods launching in 10 seconds, the computer announced. Jiwoo took a deep breath. She thought about the 50,000 people below, waiting to die. She thought about Earth, their home that had taught them to survive anything. Here we go, she muttered. The drop pods launched, streaking toward the planet below like falling stars. The drop pods screamed through the atmosphere, glowing red from the heat of re-entry. Inside each pod, 6 Marines sat strapped in tight harnesses, enduring G-forces that would have crushed most alien species. The pods shook violently, but the humans inside stayed conscious. Their bodies adapted to Earth's harsh environment. Kresh ground forces watched the sky as hundreds of burning streaks appeared overhead. Their commander laughed. They're dropping troops? In those burning coffins? They'll all be dead before they land. But the pods didn't crash. They deployed parachutes and retro rockets at the last moment, slamming into the ground hard but intact. Doors blew open with explosive charges, and humans poured out, weapons ready. Jiwoo hit the ground in the middle of the colony's central plaza. Around her, her squad was already forming up. They could see Kresh soldiers 300 meters away, shocked by the sudden landing. Move! Secure the civilian holding area, Jiwoo ordered. Her squad ran forward. The Kresh soldiers recovered and opened fire. Energy bolts cut through the air, striking the buildings around the advancing Marines. Jiwoo's squad returned fire, moving from cover to cover with practiced efficiency. One Kresh soldier stood up to get a better shot. Private Woo Jin, who had landed 2 kilometers away from his intended drop zone, was already set up with his sniper rifle. He squeezed the trigger once. The Kresh soldier fell. Target down, Woo Jin reported calmly over the radio. His pod had been hit during descent, thrown off course, but he had survived. Now he was doing what he did best, supporting his fellow Marines from a distance. In the colony's holding center, 50,000 civilians huddled together, terrified. They were Valerians, Thenari, and Quellans, peaceful species who had never known war. Kresh soldiers guarded them, waiting for the execution order. The building shook as something impacted the front entrance. The Kresh guards raised their weapons, pointing them at the door. The door exploded inward and smoke filled the room. Through the smoke came Jiwoo's squad. The Kresh fired, but the Marines had shields activated. They advanced steadily, returning fire with precision. The Kresh guards fell one by one. "Civilians, stay down!" Jiwoo shouted in Galactic Common. "We're here to help. We're from Earth." A Thenari civilian, an older male named Maltris, looked up in disbelief. "Earth? But how? The council said no one was coming." "The council was wrong," Jiwoo said, helping him to his feet. "Now we need to get all of you to safety. Can you help organize the others?" Maltris nodded, tears in his eyes. Yes, we can do that." Outside, the battle was intensifying. Kresh ground forces had recovered from their initial surprise and were mounting a counterattack. They had vehicles, heavy weapons, and superior numbers, but they didn't understand what they were fighting. A Kresh armored vehicle rolled toward a position held by a human squad. The squad leader, Corporal Minho, didn't retreat. Instead, he waited until the vehicle was close, then fired a rocket at its weakest point. The vehicle exploded, blocking the street. "Use the terrain," Minho shouted. "Make them come to us." The Marines had trained for urban combat on Earth, in cities designed by humans. This colony was built by gentler species, with wider streets and more open spaces. To the Kresh, it was a standard battlefield. To the humans, it was full of choke points and ambush opportunities. Above the planet, the space battle continued. The Relentless and Vanguard were still fighting the remaining Kresh ships, keeping them away from the colony. But Vectal's flagship was trying to break through to orbital bombardment position. On the Indomitable, Captain Daehyun watched the ground battle feed and the space battle display simultaneously. His ship was in low orbit, providing air support to the Marines, while also watching for Kresh ships trying to bombard the surface. "Captain, we're detecting Kresh reinforcements moving toward the colony from the east," reported a tactical officer. "Ground troops, at least 2,000 of them." Daehyun looked at the medical officer stationed on the bridge. "Dr. Yuna, what's your assessment of their physical capabilities?" Yuna pulled up data on her screen. "They're strong, Captain, but they tire quickly. Their homeworld's lower gravity means they have less stamina than humans. If we can make them fight for an extended period, they'll exhaust themselves." "Then we'll give them a long fight," Daehyun decided. "All ground units. Enemy reinforcements incoming. Don't try to stop them. Let them come to you, then hold your positions. Make them work for every meter." Jiwoo received the order while evacuating civilians through the colony's back streets. She redirected her forces, setting up defensive positions along the likely approach routes. When the Kresh reinforcements arrived, they found humans waiting for them behind strong cover. The Kresh charged forward, confident in their numbers. The humans opened fire, steady and precise. The battle became a grinding affair. The Kresh would advance, take casualties, and be forced to take cover. Then they would try again. Each time the humans held their positions. Each time, the Kresh lost more soldiers. After 30 minutes of continuous fighting, the Kresh soldiers were gasping for breath, their movement slower. The humans, evolved on a heavy-gravity world with dangerous predators, were still moving at full speed. "They're exhausted," Jiwoo observed, watching enemy soldiers struggle. "Push forward. Drive them back." But then the situation changed. A Kresh commander, desperate to break the human lines, gave an order that violated every rule of galactic warfare. He ordered the use of poison gas. Green clouds began spreading through the streets. Human Marines, protected by their sealed combat suits, continued fighting. But the clouds were drifting toward the areas where civilians were being evacuated. "Gas attack," someone shouted over the radio. "The wind is pushing it toward the civilian gathering point." Dr. Yuna heard the report from orbit. Her mind raced. She pulled up the chemical composition of the gas that the sensors had detected. It was a nerve agent, deadly to most species. "Captain, I need access to the colony's atmospheric processors," Yuna said urgently. "For what?" Daehyun asked. "I can synthesize a neutralizing agent, but I need a way to disperse it quickly." "Do it," Daehyun ordered. "Hyun, give Dr. Yuna whatever she needs." Hyun redirected computer power to Yuna's lab. She worked frantically, combining chemicals, running simulations. The gas was spreading fast. She had maybe 10 minutes before it reached the civilians. On the ground, medic Yoonji was treating wounded Marines when she saw the green cloud approaching. She grabbed her medical kit and ran toward the civilian gathering point. If that gas reached the aliens, thousands would die. She found Field Dr. Haiwan already there, trying to prepare for casualties. "We don't have enough antidote for this many people," Haiwan said. "Then we buy time," Yoonji replied. She began setting up emergency ventilation equipment, trying to create a clean air bubble. Suddenly, the colony's atmospheric processors roared to life. They began pumping a blue mist into the air. Where the blue mist touched the green gas, both dissolved harmlessly. "That's Dr. Yuna's work," Yoonji said with relief. "She did it." Aboard the Indomitable, Yuna slumped in her chair, exhausted. "The neutralizing agent is deployed. But Captain, we need to stop those gas attacks. If they use a different compound, I might not be able to counter it in time." "Understood," Daehyun said. He opened a channel to the Marine forces. "All units, locate and neutralize the Kresh chemical weapons. Priority target." Woo Jin, still operating from his distant position, heard the order. He scanned the battlefield with his rifle scope, looking for anything unusual. There, a Kresh vehicle with specialized equipment. That had to be it. He calculated wind, distance, and the planet's gravity. Then he fired. The shot traveled over 2 kilometers, striking the vehicle's gas containers. The vehicle exploded, destroying the chemical weapons. "Chemical weapons neutralized," Woo Jin reported. The Kresh ground commander realized his situation was hopeless. His forces were exhausted. His chemical weapons destroyed, and the humans showed no signs of slowing down. He sent a surrender signal. Ji-woo received the signal and ordered ceasefire. Slowly, Kresh soldiers began laying down their weapons. Human Marines moved in, securing the prisoners. Above the planet, the space battle was reaching its conclusion. Half of Vektal's fleet was destroyed or captured. The remaining ships were scattered. But Vektal himself was not giving up. "If I cannot have this colony, no one will," he declared. His flagship began charging its main weapons, preparing to bombard the planet. On the Indomitable, alarms blared. "Captain, the Kresh flagship is preparing to fire on the colony," a tactical officer shouted. Daehyun looked at his options. The Kresh flagship had powerful shields. A normal attack wouldn't stop it in time. But there was one option that might work. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it would work. "Helm, set course directly for the Kresh flagship. Full speed," Daehyun ordered. His crew looked at him in shock. "Sir, a ramming course?" the helm officer asked. "Not ramming," Daehyun corrected. "We're going to get close enough that our shields overlap with theirs. Then we fire everything we have at point-blank range." Engineer Hyun's voice came over the communication system. "Captain, what you're suggesting? The G-forces alone could kill the crew." "Will it work?" Daehyun asked. There was a pause. "Yes, if we survive the acceleration." "Then we do it," Daehyun said. He activated the ship-wide address system. "All hands, brace for high-G maneuver, secure all stations. This is going to hurt." The Indomitable's engines blazed to full power. The ship accelerated toward the Kresh flagship at a speed that should have been impossible for a vessel of its size. On the Kresh flagship, Vektal watched the human ship approach. "They're going to ram us? That's their plan? Activate point defense. Destroy them." But the Indomitable was moving too fast. Kresh weapons fire struck its shields, but the ship didn't slow down. It was getting closer, closer. Aboard the Indomitable, crew members grunted under the G-forces. Some blacked out briefly, but most stayed conscious, their Earth-evolved bodies able to withstand the brutal acceleration. Daehyun gripped his command chair, watching the distance counter drop. Weapons, prepare to fire on my mark. The Indomitable came alongside the Kresh flagship, so close their shields were almost touching. The distance between the ships was less than 50 meters. Fire, Daehyun commanded. Every weapon on the Indomitable fired simultaneously at point-blank range. The Kresh flagship's shields collapsed instantly. Explosions rippled across its hull. The ship's main weapons went offline. Its engines failed. The Indomitable pulled away, its own shields barely holding. But Vektal's flagship was dead in space, powerless and defeated. On the colony below, the civilians cheered. The battle was over. They were safe. The smoke was still rising from the battlefield when the rescue operations began. Human Marines moved through the colony, helping civilians to safety, treating the wounded, and clearing debris. The Kresh prisoners were secured and given medical attention according to galactic law. Maltris, the elderly Thanari who had first spoken to Jiwoo, walked through the streets with tears in his eyes. Around him, children were playing again, their fear replaced with wonder at the human soldiers who had saved them. "I don't understand," Maltris said to Dr. Yuna, who was setting up a medical station. "The Galactic Council said it was too dangerous to help us. They said we were already dead. Why did you come?" Yuna looked up from her work. "Because you asked for help. That's reason enough." "But you lost soldiers. 47 of your people died saving us." "And 50,000 of you lived," Yuna replied softly. "On Earth, we have a saying. We don't leave people behind. It doesn't matter if you're human or alien. If you need help and we can give it, we come." Observer Realthar had been recording everything. Every moment of the battle, every act of courage, every time a human soldier had risked their life to save an alien civilian. His report would be transmitted to the Galactic Council within hours. He found Captain Daehyun on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at damage reports. The ship had taken serious hits, but it was still functional. The crew was already making repairs. "Captain, may I speak with you?" Realthar asked. Daehyun nodded, still reviewing the reports. "Of course." "I need to understand something," Realthar said. "Your planet, Earth, it's classified as a Class 12 death world, the most dangerous rating in galactic records. Your people evolved fighting predators, surviving disasters, enduring conditions that would kill most species. I've seen that strength in battle." "Is there a question?" Daehyun asked. "Yes. With all that power, that strength, that aggression, why did you use it to save us? Why not conquer? Why not dominate? You could force the galaxy to obey Earth. Instead, you risk your lives for strangers." Daehyun finally looked up from his reports. "You're thinking about it wrong. Yes, Earth is dangerous. Yes, we evolved fighting to survive. But that's exactly why we help others. We know what it's like to face death and feel helpless. We know what it means to be afraid. And we know how much it matters when someone decides to fight for you instead of against you." He walked to the window, looking down at the colony below. "My homeworld made us strong, but it also taught us compassion. Because on Earth we learned that survival isn't just about being the strongest, it's about helping each other. It's about standing together against the dangers. That's what humanity is, Observer. We're not just warriors, we're protectors." Realthar was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed, a gesture of deep respect. The galaxy needs to hear this. They need to understand what humanity truly is. On the Kresh flagship, Vektal sat in a cell, defeated and humiliated. He had conquered 47 systems. He had never lost a battle. Until Earth. A human guard stood outside his cell. It wasn't Jiwoo, but another Marine named Danby. Vektal glared at her through the energy barrier. "You think this changes anything?" Vektal growled. "The Kresh Dominion will send more fleets. They will avenge this defeat." Danby looked at him calmly. "Maybe they will. And if they attack innocent people, we'll stop them too. That's what we do." "You can't protect everyone," Vektal said. "No," Danby agreed. "But we can try. And that's more than you ever did." Back on Earth, the news of the victory at Helios Colony spread quickly. People gathered in public spaces to watch the broadcasts. Young children looked up at the sky, dreaming of the stars. A young boy named Jin Woo watched the footage of the battle with his parents. He saw the human ships fighting impossible odds. He saw Marines risking their lives for aliens they had never met. He saw his species doing what they did best, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. "Mom, when I grow up, I want to be like them," Jinwoo said. His mother smiled and ruffled his hair. "Then study hard. The Defense Force needs smart people as much as brave ones." At the Galactic Council chambers, Rilthar's report was broadcast to all member species. The chamber, which had been dismissive of the human mission, fell silent as they watched the footage. They saw 3 human ships face 15 Kresh vessels and win. They saw human pilots flying maneuvers that should have been impossible. They saw Marines boarding enemy ships in the middle of space battles. They saw soldiers running into danger to save civilians while their own people were under fire. High Counselor Trelvon watched with growing shame. He had called the mission foolish. He had predicted total failure. He had been completely wrong. When the report ended, the council chamber remained silent for a full minute. Then the Valerian representative stood. "I move that we formally thank the Earth Defense Force for their actions at Helios Colony," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "And I move that we apologize for our failure to act when action was needed." The motion passed unanimously. Ambassador Ki-wan received the council's message with quiet satisfaction. He sent a simple reply. "Earth doesn't need your thanks, but the galaxy needs you to do better. Those civilians needed help, and only humans answered. What does that say about the rest of you?" The message stung because it was true. Across the galaxy, species began to reconsider their policies. Some began developing rapid response forces. Others started training their militaries differently, incorporating lessons learned from watching humans fight. But 3 species, the Valerians, Thinari, and Quellans, did something more. They sent a formal request to Earth, asking for a mutual defense treaty. They wanted to be under Earth's protection. The Earth government debated the request for a week. Finally, they agreed, but with conditions. Earth would help protect these species, but in return, those species would help Earth teach other worlds how to defend themselves. 6 months after the Battle of Helios Colony, a ceremony was held. Captain Dae-hyun stood on a stage with his senior officers, Taiman, Ji-woo, Sung-ho, Yuna, and others. The Galactic Council was awarding them medals for their service. Thousands attended the ceremony. Aliens from across the galaxy came to see the humans who had done the impossible. In the front row sat the civilians from Helios Colony, including Maltris and many of the children who had been saved. High Counselor Trelvon presented the medals personally. When he reached Dae-hyun, he paused. "Captain, I owe you an apology," Trelvon said quietly. "I called your mission foolish. I was wrong." "You were scared," Dae-hyun replied. "Fear makes people cautious. But sometimes, caution is just another word for cowardice. The galaxy needs to learn the difference." The ceremony concluded with the unveiling of a monument on Helios Colony. It was a simple statue showing a human marine helping an alien child to safety. The inscription was in multiple languages, but the message was the same in all of them. They came when no one else would. They fought when victory seemed impossible. They saved us not because they had to, but because we asked. This is what humanity means. On Earth, the Defense Force was flooded with new applications. Young people like Jin Woo, inspired by what they had seen, wanted to join. Wanted to be part of something larger than themselves. Wanted to be protectors. New ships were commissioned. The next generation of the Indomitable class was already being built. Earth was preparing, not for conquest, but for the next time someone, somewhere, sent out a desperate call for help. Dr. Yuna established a joint research station, bringing together human and alien scientists. They were developing new medical techniques, combining the best of all species knowledge. Healing instead of hurting. Sung-ho was training the first mixed-species fighter squadron. Pilots from 6 different worlds were learning to fly the human way. Aggressive, creative, and just a little bit crazy. Ji-woo was teaching hand-to-hand combat to alien Marines. Most of them couldn't match human strength, but they were learning human tactics. Human determination. And then, 6 months and 1 day after the Battle of Helios Colony, a new distress call reached Earth. Admiral Mincio brought it to Ambassador Kiwan personally. It was from a mining colony in the Outer Rim. Raiders were attacking. They needed help. Kiwan looked at the message, then at the Admiral. They both knew what the answer would be. "Prep the fleet," Kiwan said. Mincio nodded and pulled up a list of available ships. The Indomitable was ready. It had been repaired, upgraded, and the crew had rested. They had painted something new on the hull, words that had become their unofficial motto after Helios. "No one left behind." Captain Dae-hyun received his orders within the hour. He stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at his crew. They had been through hell together at Helios. Some of them still carried scars. But when he told them about the new mission, not one person hesitated. "We're going again?" Taemin asked. "We're going again," Dae-hyun confirmed. "How many ships are attacking the colony?" Jiwoo asked. 6. "And how many civilians need rescue?" 12,000. Jiwoo smiled. "Then it'll be easier than last time." The crew laughed. They had faced 15 Kresh warships and won. 6 raiders would be nothing. The Indomitable launched from Earth orbit, accompanied by the Relentless and Vanguard, along with 2 new ships, the Defiant and the Guardian. 5 ships total, all crewed by humans, all carrying the same message. Help was on the way. As the fleet jumped to FTL, streaking across space toward another desperate cry for aid, the rest of the galaxy watched. Some with admiration. Some with fear. Some with hope. Earth had shown them what a Deathworld species could become. Not conquerors, not destroyers, but protectors. Warriors who fought not for territory or resources, but for the simple reason that someone had asked for help. The SOS had released the full might of humanity's Deathworlders. And the galaxy would never be the same again. In a small home on Earth, young Jin-woo watched the news broadcast showing the fleet's departure. He was doing his homework, studying hard, preparing for the day when he too could join them. His notebook was open to a page where he had written, in careful letters, "When someone calls for help, we answer. That's what humans do." Outside his window, stars glittered in the night sky. Somewhere out there, 12,000 people were waiting, hoping someone would come. They didn't know it yet, but hope was already on its way, traveling faster than light, carried by ships marked with Earth's flag and crewed by Deathworlders who had learned that true strength wasn't about surviving a harsh world. It was about using that strength to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. The Indomitable raced through the darkness of space, a beacon of hope in a galaxy that had forgotten what courage looked like. And behind it, Earth prepared to answer the next call, and the one after that, and every call that would come. Because that was what humanity had become. Not the galaxy's conquerors, its guardians. And when the next SOS came, as it inevitably would, they would answer with the same simple message that had become humanity's promise to the stars. Message received. Earth Defense Force en route. "Hold on,"